Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to the first in a series of free weekly seminars designed to help businesses reopen after being closed as a result of COVID-19. I'm Luis Cruz, Community and Public Relations Director at the San Diego Union-Tribune, and I will be moderating today's discussion. These Back in the Workplace seminars are part of the Union-Tribune's Together San Diego initiative aimed at helping businesses, workers, and the community recover from the economic impact caused by the pandemic. As you know, COVID-19's impact on the global economy has forced organizations in every industry, including architecture and design, to flex and evolve both in real time and in the long term. When this crisis subsides, most of us won't return to business as usual, so we want to make sure you have the latest and most accurate information. Joining us today for this important discussion is Marie Burke-Kenny. Marie is the leader of Procopio's Labor and Employment Practice Group and a member of the firm's Management Committee. She was named Businesswoman of the Year in 2018 by the San Diego Business Journal. She is ranked by Best Lawyers in America and Super Lawyers in the category of employment law and was named one of the top 100 women lawyers in California by the Daily Journal in 2015. Also joining us today is Elif Tinney, Design and Senior Workplace Director at Gensler San Diego, an architecture and design firm. Elif has 18 years of experience in designing for corporate, technology, government, and education clients. She collaborates with clients to understand their business goals and their cultural aspirations to provide design solutions that foster a positive human experience. Marie and Elif will each be giving us a presentation of up to 20 minutes, and then we'll allow another 15 minutes or so for some Q&A. You can ask your questions in the Q&A box on the lower right-hand side of the screen. And Marie and Elif, thank you both for joining us today. We'll kick things off with Marie Burke-Kenny, who will discuss important employment practices and policies to navigate the new employment landscape created by COVID-19. Marie?
Thank you very much, Luis. I'm delighted to be with you guys this morning. It's been about 92 days and 2 hours since the governor locked me at home with my 6 kids, ages 11 to 16. And just to put that in context, that's 3 teenagers and 3 tweenagers. So this has been a very life-enriching experience. Like many of you, we're all grappling with the rapidly changing laws, public health orders, emergency relief laws that are being passed by Congress, and all of the pandemic financial issues, and the most significant civil rights movement that we've probably witnessed since the 1960s. So it is with that context that I'm offering today some guidance for employers on how to navigate through all of that. And I'd love to tell you some good jokes for you today, but like I said, I've been quarantined for 92 days. So the best joke I've heard in those 92 days was from one of my kids who said, "What kind of jokes do you tell during quarantine?" And drum roll, please, an inside joke. Yes. You can tell I've been stuck with kids for a while. Anyway, with that, we're going to start the PowerPoint presentation, and Fiona's going to go to the next slide. Perfect. So, agenda today, next slide please, is we're going to talk big picture about the resilience roadmap established by the governor and specific to San Diego, the reopening plan. We're going to talk about some good practices that employers should consider with respect to return to work documentation, handling absences from employees and refusals to return to work, managing a remote workforce, because San Diego County, like many counties, are requiring employers to maximize telework, and cynically, the anticipated litigation we see coming out of the COVID pandemic era, and just some practical tips for employers. And just to illustrate how rapidly changing everything is, you probably heard yesterday about the new public health order issued by the Public Health Department of the state of California, where now all individuals are required to wear masks in public within 6 feet of another individual. And that was prompted in part by Orange County rescinding its order requiring facial coverings in public. And it's also been driven by reports out of both China and Germany that masks can actually reduce the daily rate of infections by 40%. So next slide, please. We'll talk briefly about the governor's resilience map. You'll see there's quite a few links to various resources in the PowerPoint that you can access after the presentation. So just to put everything in context, we're in phase 2, where many businesses have reopened. In the left-hand side of this presentation, you'll see offices when telework is not possible. And that's a question I get a lot is, can we require our employees to return to work? They've been remote working. We don't think they're as productive or efficient. Can we insist that they come back to work? I've reviewed about 6 or 7 county orders in the past couple of weeks, and virtually every county order states unequivocally that businesses are required to maximize or make every effort to provide telework or remote work to its employees. So the challenge for employers is that if you require employees to return to work, they could easily say, well, you're asking me to violate the county order. There's a $1,000 fine, 6 months of imprisonment, and then you potentially set yourself up for some type of a employment claim, such as retaliation for exercising a legal right. So it's just important to remember the key concept I would advocate for employers right now is flexibility. Many employers over the last 10, 15 years have been resistant to remote work. They don't really want the camel's nose under the tent, and they wanted to ensure that everybody had to show up to work every day. Well, it's a new era, and as Louise said, we're never going to work the same after this is all over. So just keep in mind that that is a key issue for many employees. And then there are specific guidances the County of San Diego has provided for retail businesses that reopen, restaurants that reopen. And they've actually done a really great job of posting a reopening plan that's generic to most businesses. So let's go to the next slide and highlight just some of the aspects of that reopening plan. This reopening plan, the link is on the next slide, but let's just focus on, again, first foremost, teleworking opportunities must be maximized. Employees have to be told to stay home if they're sick. After 90 plus days of this, I'm sure you're thinking, no duh, if they're sick, they should stay home. The county has confirmed that temperature checks are still required of employees who are entering the workplace. And if they have a temperature of more than 100 degrees, they must be excluded. Employees must wear face coverings in the workplace if they're within 6 feet of each other. If they're in a private office with a locked door, it's not required. Employers are required to fill out this 3-page safe reopening plan and post it in the workplace. And it should include a cleaning schedule, letting employees know when bathrooms and common areas are being disinfected. Employers are required to provide personal protective equipment to its employees, such as face coverings, gloves, hand sanitizer, obviously promoting and ensuring hygiene, regular hand washing, having regular amounts of hand sanitizer throughout the workplace is also critically important. Signs posted should require 6 feet physical distancing, and there should be signs posted encouraging pedestrian traffic. Now, a little brag about Procopio, if you go to our Del Mar Heights office or our downtown office, you will actually see white circles with red arrows pointing you in the direction of the one-way traffic flow. It looks great. I'm very proud of our HR team and the great work that our facilities team did to put that in place. But let me tell you that if you're in your office and you need to go to the restroom, it's not fun to walk almost a 1/8 of a mile around the entire building when you follow the one-way traffic arrows to go to the restroom. But in any event, it is important that you comply with the reopening plan again, because if you have an employee where it is not possible for that employee to work remotely, maybe they're a payroll employee and they need to physically sign checks, you want to make sure that you're complying with all the safety requirements so they don't allege that you're not providing a safe work environment. So let's go to the next slide. This is one of the resource slides, just showing you where you can locate the San Diego County reopening plan. That's a screenshot of it. And here's some other county orders that also talk about return to work. So let's go to the next slide. Before you get too overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information on the slide, this is kind of the issue spotting things that you could consider when you're actually ready to physically return your employees to work. It's an opportunity for employers to maybe clean up their documentation. If you don't have an arbitration agreement in place, this might be an opportunity for you to get one in place. If you haven't updated your handbook in a while, this might be a time for you to update your handbook. But specific to return to work, if you're going to allow employees to return to the physical office, either now or at some point in the future when the governor gives the go-ahead, it's important to let your employees, are they going to be returning to a full-time job? Or is there going to be reduced pay or reduced hours? So you want to identify that. If you're currently allowing employees to return to work, obviously there may be a risk, but at least consider providing staggered schedules to reduce the number of employees in the physical workplace at the same time. You could take, a floor of a building and divide it into 2 or 3 groups and say Group A employees come into the office Monday, Tuesday, Group B come in Wednesday, Thursday, Group C comes in Friday, and then you rotate that. It's important to make sure that you're doing temperature checks at the point of arrival at the workplace. You cannot require employees to do that temperature check themselves at home. We asked, the county said no. They said, employers, that's your responsibility. And for those employers who have generate more than 25 million in revenue or collect 50,000 pieces of consumer information per year, you may need to provide a privacy notice under the CCPA. One of our excellent attorneys, Elaine Harwell, has been working with our clients to provide those types of notices. This is an opportunity for you to update your illness injury prevention plan. That's an OSHA requirement, and have mandatory safety policies that are specific to this COVID pandemic time. Make sure that you let employees know the consequences for not complying with safety requirements. If you have an employee who says, I refuse to wear a mask, and yet they want to come to the office, they lose the privilege of coming to the office. If you're going to have any mandatory testing, you want to make sure that you make that clear to employees, identify opportunities for antibody testing. Now, the EEOC came out this week, which is the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and said you're not allowed to require antibody testing of your employees. And some of that is because it's not considered to be that reliable, about 50% reliability, but you can provide it as a benefit to your employees if you choose to do so. If you have employees who have tested positive for COVID, you may want to require that they give you a fitness for duty note in order to return to the physical workplace. If employees have been working remotely for some time and you've provided with them equipment and supplies to work remotely from home, you would want to make sure you have an inventory checking the return of equipment. If they've been working remotely under California law, they may have incurred expenses that you as an employer are legally required to reimburse. For example, when they're in the office, they can pick up the phone without incurring any expense. But California law requires employers to reimburse employees for a percentage of cell phone use. Likewise, we believe after the pandemic, employees may claim and may be successful in claiming that they're entitled to a percentage of reimbursement for internet, Wi-Fi, utility services, and the like. It's just important that you address the expense reimbursement with employees and make sure that you are working with them to reimburse them for actual expenses or provide a reasonable estimated stipend for expenses. You might wonder why I say no violence or discrimination in the workplace during the pandemic. We've had examples in the news of employees who said, you asked me to put on a mask, I'll show you my Glock. So obviously no discrimination, no workplace violence. We've seen some unfortunate bias arise with respect to stereotypes that certain individuals are more likely to spread the coronavirus. So it's just an important time to reiterate zero tolerance for discrimination, harassment, workplace violence. And if you have employees who are showing up to the work and waiting in line for temperature checks and they're hourly employees, you will need to pay them for those temperature checks. But again, it may be a gray area if it's required by the county that you operate in. So lots to consider. Don't get too overwhelmed. It's kind of a think about these things. You may not want to do everything on the slide. Let's move to absences or refusals to work. Next slide, please. So you probably are aware that that Congress enacted the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, and with that law provided emergency paid sick leave and extended family medical leave. But when those leaves expire, again, flexibility is the key here. You may nonetheless be required under California law to provide employees with the unpaid leave of absence to accommodate them for a medical condition, maybe being immunocompromised. And frustrating to employers is sometimes a refusal to return to work where telework is not possible. Had some clients say, Marie, I asked my employees to return to the workplace and they're telling me they're earning more money on unemployment and they refuse to come back. What can I do about that? So we'll talk about that in just a second. And then just as a reminder, there's new workers' comp coverage for COVID in the workplace. You just have to be aware with all of these issues of absences or refusals to return to work, the risk is that you as an employer may be actually liable for retaliation. So let's take it one at a time. If an employee gives you the required paperwork to take 80 hours of COVID paid sick leave, provide the 80 hours of COVID paid sick leave. You can get a tax credit from your very next quarterly withholding for payroll to offset that 80 hours. If you have an employee who's home with a young child due to school closure, and we think by extension maybe summer camp closures, they may be entitled to up to 12 weeks of extended family medical leave. We could do a seminar just about those two topics. Refusal to return to work. You have to be very careful. If an employee is saying, I am not coming back to work, I'm earning more money on unemployment, and you get that in writing and it's black and white like that, yeah, you can fire them. However, it's not always that clear. Usually it's something to the effect of, I'm okay, I don't need to come back to work. And by the way, I'm really worried about this virus. My family has a history of having immunocompromised. I live with an elderly parent, and they might bring in protected activities or protected bases for not returning to work. So you have to be very careful. And again, the word is flexible, not to just assume the worst and terminate an employee who is, quote, refusing to return to work. They may have a legal right not to return to work. So it's important that you work with counsel to make sure that you're handling each of these situations carefully. Like I said, if they say outright in an email or a text, I'm not coming back, I'm earning great money on unemployment, that's pretty much a no-brainer. So next slide, please. For now, it seems like with all the county orders virtually mandating that employers maximize telework, I thought it'd be helpful to just go over some of the legal issues and some of the management issues that we've been helping our clients with during this time. So first up is the legal issues. It's very important if you, prior to the pandemic, had a predominantly in the office workforce, and now they've gone remote. It's important to have a remote work agreement where you go through issues such as confidentiality of information, honoring your electronic communications policy, dealing with expense reimbursement, telling employees to record their time and take their meal and rest breaks. All of those issues would be well documented in a remote work agreement. We talked briefly about expense reimbursement. There's some expenses like cell phone, Wi-Fi, where you can, as an employer, look at objective data, come up with a reasonable stipend, and say to an employee, I'm giving you this hypothetical number, $15 a month for your internet, I'm gonna give you $25 towards your cell phone. But it's really critically important that you tell the employee if that's not sufficient, they have the right to come back to you with documentation and request additional reimbursement. Again, you would think with wage and hour compliance, employees are working from home, there shouldn't be a problem with them taking meal and rest periods. But in fact, I can tell you as an exempt salaried employee, I find sometimes it's harder to leave my desk to use the restroom. And so it's an important time to reiterate to employees, please take your meal periods, please take your rest periods, please record all of your time, because you don't want to come out of this pandemic with a wage and hour class action or representative action. When you send your employees home, or if you're allowing them to continue to work from home, it's a good idea to just give them some basic safety training, how to set up their computer, how to put their computer at eye level, how to position their chair. Procopio, again, shout out to the HR team, did a great, huddle. We meet every week for 15 minutes virtually now. It used to be in person at every office, and we talk about our culture and our values. And at one of our huddles, our HR director talked about safety, working safely from home. So having that type of training is important. Management issues. We also hear from supervisors, managers, they're frustrated. It's harder to manage employees remotely. There's suspicion and assumptions, they're not working. So it's really important to establish clear expectations and actually have a mechanism for monitoring productivity. Do daily check-ins, set deadlines. There's information out there that employees get depressed and feel isolated when they work remotely and they don't see each other. So having more Zoom meetings throughout the week. Maybe you only met every 2 weeks when you're in the office, but now that you're remote, you need to meet a lot more quickly. And consider different types of technology. People get overwhelmed by email. They get overwhelmed by Zoom. So maybe you have an instant messaging app that you can use through your computer system. Recently, I instituted using Jabber with my team, and it's been very helpful because you can screen share. You don't have to look at each other. You can hear each other on a phone call and do screen share. So those are just ideas for how to manage productivity and employees during a remote work period. And again, just, industrial psychologists are telling us repeatedly that this is a particularly difficult time for obviously us, but our employees. Most of all, humans crave predictability, and that's all but disappeared. Nobody knows what's going to happen with the economy. Nobody knows when the virus is going to be contained. And working remotely presents huge socializing problems. And attorneys are particularly guilty of being lonely, and it's considered one of the loneliest occupations. So now more than ever, it's important to enhance the communications through regular communication and not just make it all work related. Have a frivolous, bring your pet to your Zoom meeting or bring your kid to your Zoom meeting. You've been hearing about virtual happy hours, obviously within reason, but those are important things to do to create socializing opportunities for employees. Why is this important? Why is an employment law attorney telling you about this? Well, at the end of the day, my primary goal is to prevent employers from being sued. And the reason that employees sue is not what happened to them, but how it happened to them, feeling misunderstood, feeling that they weren't treated fairly. There's no right to fairness in the Constitution, but every single employee believes there's a right to relative fairness. So making sure that there's opportunities to create cohesion, combat isolation, is really critically important. Having a series of, webinars or on mental health or creating virtual happy hours or coffee chats, those soft touches can really go a long way to keeping your workforce engaged. And when you have an engaged workforce, they take care of your clients better, they take care of your customers much better, and they're a lot less likely to sue. So that's just some issues to seriously consider with respect to managing remote employees. So let's go to the next slide. This is where the cynical attorney must report that we're already seeing some lawsuits being filed right in the middle of COVID, alleging employers are not providing a safe workplace, alleging that employees who brought up safety concerns are being fired in retaliation for whistleblowing. So this here is just kind of a slide that talks about these are the types of issues that employers should be watching for. If an employee is making a good faith complaint regarding safety and you're stressed out and you know that you've worked your you-know-what off to make sure every single protocol is in place and safe, it's still important to take that safety complaint seriously and not have any knee-jerk reaction and terminate employees right after they make safety complaints. It's important under the California Labor Code to provide a safe work environment for your employees. So if you learn that someone's tested positive for COVID-19, it's important to exclude anyone who is in direct contact with that employee from the workplace for 14 days and require some medical documentation before they return to work. Like I said, we're seeing a rise in the types of discrimination or harassment claims For example, the EEOC came out this week and said, no employers, you can't automatically exclude people who are 65 years or older from the workplace. That's their choice, not yours. So if you get to the point where we're allowed to bring people back to the physical workplace and there's still not a vaccine, you can't, out of the benevolence of your heart and your concern, say, well, we're not letting anyone over the age of 65 return. That's their choice, not your choice. Under the new laws, failing to provide the COVID sick leave or extended paid leave, those are going to be new claims that we anticipate. Failure to provide reasonable accommodations, that's really just a failure to be flexible. If an employee tells you they have a medical condition, they're entitled to unpaid leave. Unfortunately, we've had clients who had to shut down work sites overnight, and typically you're required to provide 60-day notice under the Cal-Warren Act. The governor issued an executive order allowing a shorter notice period for unforeseeable business circumstances, but nonetheless, we anticipate those types of lawsuits. In fact, there have been many filed throughout the country already. And last but not least, wage and hour class action and private attorney general action, representative action claims, which are very predominant in California right now. And the issues would be not reimbursing employees for remote work, making them wait in line for a temperature check, not paying them. And my colleague loves to shake his head and say, and so, don't be surprised if you see remote work employees saying they didn't get a meal or rest period at home. The last slide is just kind of some practical tips for employers based on our counseling practice, the types of issues we're seeing come up with our clients. Now more than ever, it is critically important to have reliable and transparent communication. I hear over and over again that employees often feel left in the dark, and they feel more so that way right now. And so it's important to be transparent. If you don't know if there's going to be a layoff, just say that. And it's important not to overpromise. You can't say, oh, don't worry, I'm sure your job will be fine. We don't know. But I would be transparent, and I would have regular communication, again, as a way to help create an engaged workforce, prevent claims. It's important to assess the realities of when the workforce will return to work. There's some old school supervisors who will say they need to return to the work now. I'm done with them working remotely. I would recommend that you do a survey. Who wants to return to work? What percentage of your workforce believes they would return to work if allowed to do so in the next 30 days, 90 days, 120 days? What about by December 31, 2020? This is an opportunity to realistically look at your physical workspace needs in 2020 and beyond. Be realistic about it. Establish, if you decide to return everyone to work and the governor allows it, have a return to work safety plan. Have, if you decide to allow a significant percentage of your workforce to continue working remotely after the pandemic ends, have a plan for effective remote work, like the issues we talked about from managing remote work. Do safety training and consider the documentation on the slide about return to work documentation. Again, you heard me say it now 5 times, be proactive and be flexible. And most of all, be empathetic. You're stressed out and your employees are stressed out. And now's the time that as supervisors and employers, we need to dig really deep, and we need to find that empathy and compassion. And one way to do that, this is just the Marie Burke-Kenny life advice, is turn off the news. Stop reading all the bad news. One of my favorite apps is called the Good News Network. And you go on there any given day and you'll read something really great about, on Mother's Day, Lowe's sent $1 million worth of flower baskets to senior citizens because they couldn't see their kids because they're living in nursing homes. And, you read great news about how people are helping each other out. You hear about companies donating footwear and scrubs to healthcare workers. And you hear about the granddad who used a drone to deliver donuts to his grandkids. It's good stuff. So, I've heard repeatedly that if you tell a person a piece of bad news, you need to counteract it with 3 pieces of good news in order to keep them in a stable emotional place. And again, the goal right now is to keep your workforce engaged, be transparent, and treat them well so that even if you do have to exit them from the company, they don't go and talk to a lawyer and plan a lawsuit against your business. So Thank you for your time and attention. I think that was it. You can just go to the thank you slide, Fiona, and I'll be available to answer any questions after we hear from Elif. I'm very excited to hear what she has to share.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marie. A lot of great information. We'll circle back with you in just a bit. Now let's turn it over to Elif Tinney for more on how employers should prepare to return to the workplace. Elif, it is all yours.
Thank you, Louise. Let me share my screen. Okay, all right. Well, thank you for having me, Louise, and thank you, Marie, for a great presentation. It was very insightful, and of course, thank you to San Diego Union-Tribune for hosting this important discussion. Again, my name is Elif Tinney. I'm a design director and a studio director here at Gensler in San Diego. I focus on workplace practice area, particularly with our technology clients. We are a global design firm with offices across the globe, with over 6,000 architects and designers. And what I would like to share with you today is our insight into returning back to the office. And it's going to be, there are two components to it. The first part is going to be about some of the survey results we received back from employees working from home currently, led by our Gensler Research Institute. The second component of it is going to be based on the outcome of that, and what we are hearing from our clients. What are some of the strategies that you can deploy within your workplace to ensure that your employees are feeling safe? So, you know, as you know, we are in an unprecedented moment in workplace history. With moments like this, we always have the opportunity to really reflect and redefine what our future of our cities and workplace environments are going to look like, and really focus on creating a workplace environment centered around equity, health and wellness, as well as human-centered design experience. We are really looking at meeting these challenges with optimism and determination. We are not alone in this. We work very closely with all our clients across the globe, having continuous conversations with them on what they are seeing, what the challenges are. We are also having conversations with our city leaders in our communities that we serve. That is really leading the conversation on where we want to go next. Third, we are really depending on and investing in workplace research, which part of it I'm going to be sharing with you today. And lastly, we are generating new ideas on how we can relook at what workplace is going to look like, and I'll be sharing some of those ideas with you at the end of this presentation. The broad perspective, this broad perspective really allows us to have a better understanding of why we are going back to the office and how we want to go back to the office. Marie talked to us about, you know, what are the constraints and some of the things that we do have to follow regionally or locally here in San Diego. And within those parameters, there are certain things that we can take into account to ensure that our employees are feeling safe and healthy. There are two main points that kind of came out of our research and our continuous development of those ideas. And number one is going to be the fact that the longer we work from home, the more we are away from our colleagues, the more we feel like we need to reconnect with them. Building a community, reinforcing our culture within our workplace environment, strengthening our relationships and our networks. That's what workplace is all about. And people are seeking to go back to that. And second of all, how we go back and making sure that we really instill a level of confidence for our employees, our partners, and our clients is going to lead us to go back to work in the best way possible. So I will pass through that. So the first thing, as I mentioned, I'm going to be sharing with you is the latest survey we conducted with our clients. We have been doing research on workplace for the last 15 plus years. And the iteration that I'm going to be sharing with you today is the latest one that was launched after we went, home and started working from home during COVID-19. And the results, the respondents were responding to the questions based on that. And we were really seeking to understand what are the conditions that they are working in today, and how does that inform their outlook for future of workplace. So we surveyed about 23 US workers. We had a broad range of different levels of professions, different markets, anywhere from government and defense to media to technology and sciences. And then we also had a really nice variety of generations that participated in the survey. So we believe that we have a nice cross-section of the US workforce with this small survey. Couple of things that really came out of it that is, I think, is important to understand. The lessons learned from this experience of working from home during COVID-19 really allows us an opportunity really to rethink the future of the physical workplace. And I think it's important to note that when we're talking about future of workplace, we are not necessarily separating it from the past experiences we had, as well as past research that was done on workplace research and trends. So we want to be kind of mindful of that and really kind of utilize this opportunity to make and design a better future. One of the most surprising things that came out of the survey came out of the question of how people feel about working from home after the pandemic has ended. And to our surprise, only about 12% of the US workers want to work from home full time. The rest want to have some level of workplace connection, which is really important to continue to instill our culture and purpose of our organizations to our employees, and really kind of make sure everybody is well connected, to Marie's point earlier. But folks that do want to come back to work, they do seek to see some changes in the workplace that is going to assure them that they are returning back to a safe work environment. So when we start to dive into what those numbers are starting to look like, 44% of the respondents, the majority of the respondents, do not want to work at home at all, which is really interesting. Although we have kind of gained some comfort level, again, like I mentioned, people are seeking to reconnect back with their colleagues and with their network. 26% of the respondents said they would like to stay at home 1 to 2 days of the week. And then between those two, 70% of overall population that responded to the survey would like to spend most of their work days in a workplace environment. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the blue bucket that you see on the right side of the screen, the 3 to 4 days at home is only about 18% of the respondents, and of course the 12% for 5 days of the workforce. And those folks are seeking flexibility in their work schedule. And then folks that are on the right side of the screen, the orange boxes, are really seeking to see some changes in regards to social distancing and assigned workspaces and less shared work environments. So when we ask them, why do you want to go back to work? What brings you back to the office? Really the top answers were centered around that connection to the people, their colleagues, whether it's scheduling meetings with their colleagues or socializing with their colleagues, impromptu face-to-face interactions, as well as kind of being part of that community that we were talking about earlier. Those are the top 4 responses. And again, that really links back to without that face-to-face connection, we are seeing organizations struggle with instilling that culture and organizational purpose to their employees. When we ask them about activities that are harder or easier to do from home, collaborating and staying up to date with what other colleagues are doing were the top two responses in regards to what is not working at home. So those are the challenges that our employees are facing today. Another interesting outcome out of this survey is it's in regards to the response and the difference in response when we look at the generational difference. So when broadly, younger generations are less productive at home and less satisfied with the work from home experience, which was interesting. When we started to dive into the actual results, we asked them, in these 5 categories, I feel like I made a difference. I feel like I have completed the work I needed to do. I know what is expected of me. To the other end of the spectrum, working from home is stressful. Compared to the office, I get less work done. The columns that you're seeing on top of those responses, the darker greenish color is the millennials. And they had a hard time focusing and understanding what they needed to get done at home was good. And whereas baby boomers did a great job, they were much more successful in that. And then when we go to the other end of the spectrum, the millennials found working from home actually more stressful. And I think part of that is probably linked to the fact that they are very social and they need more mentorship from the older generations, the Gen Xers and the baby boomers. And then on the other end, compared to, to the office, I get less work done at home. 25% of the millennials said yes to that. So, and then we started looking at what are the things that impact, make it harder for you to work from home. Avoiding distractions and maintaining a work-life balance was at the top of the list for the millennials. And then the baby boomer generation actually found that to be a little bit easier, avoiding distractions and maintaining that work-life balance. So another element that came out of this is, the understanding that when people do come back to work, they expect something different than what they left behind. To Louise's point earlier, they are looking for something a little bit different to address the needs of today's challenges. And part of that is going to be allowing more space for folks to be working in. Employees do not want to share desks as much as they used to. They also don't want to share kind of common spaces as much as they used to. And they also want some policy changes to support a more mobile and virtual work environment. So when we asked them what would make them feel more comfortable coming back to the office, the stricter policies, the main answers were really, the top answers were around policy. Stricter policies against coming in sick and the opportunities to work from home were kind of the top answers there, as well as increasing office cleaning, increasing distance between workstations, providing hand sanitizers, and even touchless bathroom fixtures and doors. Those types of kind of responses to the work environment are seem to be comforting for employees. And then increased social distancing and reduction in shared workspaces are viewed positively by employees. So it's another element that I'm going to be talking about as we kind of look at how that could be implemented into the workspace. So the interesting thing that I think we need to kind of continue to focus on is that the workers do want their workspaces to adapt to this new paradigm. But what the answer is, how that workspace should adapt, is still open for debate. We know that there is no one-size-fits-all approach or solution, and how the workplace adapts should be specific and unique to each organization, the business of that organization, and the culture that you're trying to maintain. There are a couple of things that you can do to kind of help with that. One of the tools Gensler have developed is similar to the survey results I have shared with you. We have actually developed a work from home experience survey that is made up of subset of questions that we just shared with you, and that allows you to gain some insight into your employees. To Marie's point earlier, surveys do go a long ways, and we have internally, actually, Gensler have deployed these surveys internally for our employees to get a better understanding of what are they looking for and who is willing to come back and what is the individual circumstances. That will give you the insight so that you can start to reimagine in the short term as well as the long term what your workspace and workplace needs should start to look like. So going back to the office, going into the second component of our presentation, there are really kind of 4 buckets of elements that we kind of want to be thinking about. The first 2 is really about the when and the who. You really want to organize and be clear about policies and framework and the indicators that allow you to come back to work environment, whether they are regulatory elements like the ones that Marie was talking about, or internal kind of policies that is established by your organization. You want to establish that and you want to communicate that clearly to your employees. And then identifying a phased entry approach to who is coming back at what stages. And then again, kind of communicating that back out to your employees is going to be important. What I'm going to be really focusing on the rest of the presentation is the where and the how, and how you can, where should the employees be working at? What does that mean to your work environment that you already have or are in the planning on designing or planning? And then, what are the protocols in your office on how employees should interact with that office environment? Well, the immediate concerns are, what happens on day 1, what activities and actions need to happen to open your doors. And you should also be considering a time period of an ongoing pandemic. If you were to return to work and the pandemic is going to be continuing, what does that interim time frame looks like, and what is the impact of that to your workplace? And in the longer run, what is that reimagined workplace that really serves the needs of now and not necessarily be stuck in what happened in the past? So something that is really forward looking. So we are working with our clients across the globe, and really we want to listen to them very carefully and really address each organization's unique concerns, as every business have their own priorities to address during this time. But as you develop your business's goals and strategies moving forward, it's important to kind of take these kind of 3 phases of what that immediate future looks like, as focusing on health and well-being of your employees. And then what is that kind of the intermediate future looks like, well, as you transition into your new reimagined workplace. Within those 3 incremental shifts, there are strategies that you can start to think about, focusing on health, anywhere from screening and monitoring protocols to increased cleaning and hygiene and physical distancing, along with what is regulated within your jurisdiction, but also just, as a business, what are your protocols? And then also really thinking about movement within the space, circulation. How do people move throughout the space that really start to support your business? And then going forward, what are the impacts of that to new typologies of workplace? What are the impacts to building infrastructure and systems? And what does the enhanced workplace start to look like, taking into account perhaps new and upcoming technologies that can really elevate the workplace environment and making it a really human-centric experience, focusing on health and well-being. And so these strategies can be deployed into different space guidelines, anywhere from common spaces like building access entrances and queuing to elevators, all the way to individual spaces within your office. And when we start to dive further into how we can kind of, I know we are coming up short on time, but I'm going to really quickly go through some of those strategies on, what does that building access can look like. You really need to start thinking about building circulation within your building, queuing, perhaps deploy single points of entry, assure that public spaces like restrooms are, reduced in occupant load so that you don't have too many people in smaller spaces. Start thinking about building systems and filtration and ventilation, and then make sure that you are communicating these strategies to your employees, with wayfinding and other strategies so that everybody is clear on what they're supposed to be doing. You should be thinking about not just your employees, but who's coming to your office, like visitors and deliveries, where those are getting, where those enter to your workspace. How are you separating and creating safe zones for individuals? And how are you communicating that so that everything is very much self-explanatory? And then really think about that circulation as well. And then utilizing perhaps the stairs as a component to assure that you can have vertical circulation throughout your space. And a couple of other things as you kind of start to dive into the individual spaces within the office, pay attention to especially smaller spaces, assuring that you have, in the conference rooms, for example, or private offices, that you are leaving doors open to promote, further air circulation and, assuring that you don't have too many people within a small space. Okay, I'm getting some messages from Fiona. Okay, I'm just going to fast forward real quick. So, we have a great amount of resources on our website that you can go to with blog posts, as well as other elements like tips and tricks and wayfinding. How do you go about kind of organizing your spaces? So feel free to please look at those, as well as kind of be on the lookout for future communication coming out for hospitality and other industries that is really prominent in San Diego, on how we can kind of dive into how we can kind of create a better future. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Elif. All right, let's see. Let's open it up for questions. We have two great resources here. If we can invite Marie Burt-Kenny back to the screen, and let's see what kind of questions. Again, great resources. Okay, how can we obtain the slides for each presentation? Will those be available?
Yeah, we'll be able to, there is some, actually, we can send some links to some of this information that is posted on our websites.
Okay, great. And we'll also be sending out the links of this recording along with the slides that you just showed into the emails that we do have.
And Luis, I know you have my PowerPoint. You're welcome to share it with the participants.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. As I mentioned,
that was wonderful information. Thank you. The survey information was in some ways very validating and in other ways very scary. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Yes, Elif, I was very surprised by the figures. 44% said they do not want to work at home.
Yeah, very interesting. So, so we're gonna have, this was kind of the first briefing from the survey. There's more insight coming out soon. It is really interesting and we really wanna dive into the why. But there are many factors that come in. As you all know, I think you get used to, you get kind of comfortable with certain setups, right? You started working from home, you got really comfortable. It took a little bit of kind of ramp up, and now we are all comfortable, but now we are starting to miss people. Now we are starting to kind of feel that disconnect from the organizations that we belong to. So I think it is starting to wear out on people a little bit. So we are starting to see that with our clients in the organizations.
So Marie, if you're an employer and you have now with the social distancing guidelines, you have less space available, less office space available. What do you recommend, especially for those employees that really want to return to work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So again, just to reiterate, because this point appears to be maybe buried a little bit in various county orders. Virtually every county order that I have looked at has told businesses they must maximize telework. So if employers have difficulties implementing proper social distancing protocols in the workplace, I again recommend just being really transparent with employees and saying, look, we understand your home setup is not ideal and you're frustrated, but the county order says we have to maximize telework. That said, maybe you let a person come in 1 day a week because some connectivity is better than no connectivity. And so some employers who want to be a little bit more aggressive in returning their employees to the physical workspace have done, like I said, splitting up a floor into different groups and having group A come in 2 days and group B 2 days, etc. Having staggered work times, having people come in as early as 5:30 a.m. and as late as 10:30 a.m. Those are all, ways to return employees to work who are really demanding to return to work in a safe way. But again, I would be very transparent. There are fines. There's a $1,000 fine and 6 months imprisonment for violating county orders. So it's not a joke. And I think just being transparent with employees saying, we're frustrated too. We want to be in the office. I just think that kind of transparency and realism is what employees need to hear right now.
Pamela Razzo has a question, says, thank you both for the info. How can companies strengthen company culture during social distancing after COVID? It's a good question.
It is a great question. And I'm particularly proud at Procopio. About 2 years ago, we invested significant resources to have an outside company and help us come in and do, first of all, a focus group with multiple segments of the firm. I think we had 6 focus groups every level of the firm to actually ask the question, what is your culture like? And then over a 2-year process, we redesigned our culture, and we actually have our Procopio Excellence, Culture of Excellence, which goes through our promise, our pledges, our service strategy. And the biggest change was once a week at 11:30 a.m., every single person in the firm stops what they're doing. And for 15 minutes, we have a person, it could be someone from the mailroom to the most successful attorney in the firm, stop and talk about what the culture means to them and pick a particular focus. And that has been a complete lifesaver during the remote period because we're able to do it now by Zoom. And recently we've had some on the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's really allowed us to feel a lot more cohesive as a firm So if you haven't done that already, which, it's a big investment, consider the remote work period, again, to use surveys. What do you think our culture is and what should it be? And then come up with some way of having engagement with employees and get their ideas and input for what they would like to talk about. So those are all great ways to just kind of bring everybody together and help them feel engaged. Disengagement is the greatest ill that really threatens employers right now.
I think that is great. The other piece that I would add to that is that we're finding that one-on-one connections and strengthening those one-on-one connections is also helpful. In a workplace environment, you're typically surrounded with your kind of small network, your little glue that kind of helps you go back to work every day, right? So, making sure that assuring that those connections still kind of continue, and checking in with your employees or your team or your smaller group of folks that you typically work with on a one-on-one basis. And because it is very personal and everybody's going through, difficult, stressful times. So check in with them, making sure that everybody's doing okay at a personal level, and let them know that you are there for them.
I agree with that completely. If you only rely on the team or group meetings, you will miss out on that personal connection. So just even once a week, a 15-minute check-in with every single person on your team is very, very beneficial.
Great advice. Do you see a change pending in commercial real estate space availability due to this pandemic?
Yeah, it's interesting because it has been kind of a big unknown what the real estate market is going to be doing, but we are seeing activity pick back up. So I think it is the big crystal ball right now that, I don't know if I have the answer for that, but right now we are optimistic.
It's interesting because I think that a lot of businesses are currently committed to leases, but certainly it's going to change, and the landscape of real estate and businesses' use of real estate in the next 2 to 3 years is going to change profoundly.
Yeah.
Marie, for people who want to work from home, are companies responsible for providing ergonomic office equipment such as chairs and desks?
That's a great question. So one of the things that I strongly recommend that employers include in a remote work agreement is a acknowledgement that the employee has access to a safe workplace without incurring expenses. Now, obviously, if that's not true, you have to start with a survey. So about a week before the stay-at-home order, several of our clients did a survey and said, if you had to work remotely tomorrow, do you have equipment? Do you have a safe place to work? Do you have a desk? Do you have a chair? And then based on that information, we were able to then develop the remote work agreements. It is a requirement under California law to provide a reasonable accommodation of employees with medical conditions or physical disabilities. So if an employee says, look, it's just not physically possible for me to sit in a normal chair at home, I have one at work, what can I do? Even at Procopio, we had people showing up in the first week after going remote, getting their monitors and getting their proper chair and grabbing their ergonomic mouse and ergonomic keyboard. It was all kind of ad hoc, but again, it's about making sure that we're actually listening to employees and having that dialogue. But if it's not possible to provide the supplies or the equipment to an employee to work safely from home, an employer can absolutely be liable under the California Labor Code for reimbursing that type of expense. So again, very important to have that open communication with employees about expenses and what they have and what they need, trying to meet that need by providing the equipment, but if that fails, obviously reimbursing the employee.
Okay. Let's see, another follow-up question to the office spaces. Will the law allow leases to be broken tied to the pandemic?
Well, I'm not a real estate lawyer, but my colleagues are getting a lot of questions about force majeure clauses and extraordinary circumstances. And the answer is, and I'm sorry it's such a lawyer answer, it depends on your lease. But certainly we've seen some of that happen. I don't know about it. Elif, have you seen that?
No, I was going to actually forward that one to you.
And I'm the employment law attorney, but we have an excellent team of real estate lawyers at Procopio. So if San Diego Union-Tribune would like a presentation on that, let me know, and we'll line up a Procopio real estate lawyer for that.
All right, here's another question for you, Marie. Are companies balancing the commuting costs and other costs that employees no longer have with the cost of home expenses to work?
That's a great question. So I don't know that they should have any correlation. So I guess what came to mind, what factual scenario came to mind when I heard that was, okay, I live in Carlsbad. I'm talking to you from Carlsbad right now. I commute 35 miles each way every day. That's 70 miles of mileage at the IRS rate of reimbursement of almost 60 cents a mile. And I haven't done that for X number of months. And yet I'm now using my cell phone and my internet to perform work remotely. Can an employer say, well, you're having a cost savings on mileage and wear and tear on your vehicle, we're not going to pay you for your cell phone? You could do that, but it's a great recipe for a wage and hour class action and a representative action in California, because California wage and hour law is probably one of the most restrictive areas of law, and you can't do that this for that type scenario with your employees. You still have to reimburse them for a reasonable percentage of cell phone or internet use.
Okay. Is there anything either of you would like to add?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, thank you again for having us. This was very insightful conversation and discussion. And, I would just add that as organizations kind of look to understand what to do next, I think it's important that we really plan things out in those 3 stages that I kind of discussed, but also make sure that you're communicating that to your employees very clearly on what those steps are.
Yeah, I agree. And I would just add that, back to the importance of regular and transparent communication, I would add to that, it's really important to have empathetic communication. It's important to let employees know now more than ever that their health and safety is a priority and that we're all in this together, which I think is the title of the series, Louise, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
We're all in this together. And that is a really terrific message, not just to create an engaged workforce, but like I said, prevent employment litigation. So, not all leaders are created equal, and there's a spectrum of emotional intelligence among leaders. So the last thing I would do is, I provide that support for leaders during this time, provide them with some extra leadership training during the remote work period, because personally, as a leader of the labor employment team and a member of the management committee, I know that what's been asked of me as a leader during this period is way more than I can recall in my entire career, just in terms of that constant contact and communication. So having support for leadership, I think, is really important. You can't just tell leaders, be empathetic, communicate. You gotta help them rehearse it and show them how it's done and do that type of training, because otherwise you're just kind of barking an order. You gotta provide that support.
Right, great advice. I know we went a little bit over, but I think it was worth it. Very insightful conversation. Marie, I host a daily live online show on our Union-Tribune Facebook page. I'm going to have you on so we can chat about the Good News Network and yes, tell people about some good news.
I love
it. All right. Thank you, Marie Burke-Kenny, partner at Procopio, San Diego's largest local full-service business and litigation firm, and Elif Tinney, design director and senior workplace director at Gensler San Diego. And thank you to all of you who joined us for the Zoom webinar. We want to remind you that our next free business seminar is next week on Friday, June 26th. Representatives from California Bank and Trust will provide a mid-year outlook on the financial markets, and they'll also be taking your questions. So don't forget to sign up for that webinar. Thank you again for joining us. I hope to see you again next week. Have a great day and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.